Mistake number one, I think, is focusing too much on their YC applications, right? It's a great brand, but it's not necessary for your business to succeed. The risk that people end up making is spending a ton of time on your application itself at risk of pausing your progress with your business, which is not even what the YC founders want you to do, right? This is a bit like what you do in high school and college. You can either learn the subject matter and get good at the underlying subject matter, or you can study past your tests and get really good at your actual, you can mug things up, you can try and get good at test taking. If you land up going to the YC application, having gotten good at writing YC applications, that's not as useful, especially if you get rejected. And then what are you going to go do with that skill? The second reason not to prepare so much is that the interview does not have a standard rubric, right? Most test taking has a standard pattern. They're evaluating you against a template. Here, there is no template because most of these businesses are one of a kind. So if you go in trying to prepare a standard set of answers, you can't preempt what kind of questions you're going to get in response. And 10 minutes, even though it feels like a short amount of time, is ample time to get into territory that you may not have otherwise rehearsed. So this rehearsing almost doesn't matter except for the exercise of actually thinking through all the aspects of your business so that you're ready to answer questions that you may get in the first place. So again, the model of the story for me is don't over-prepare, but think about all the questions that come in. And perhaps the other thing I'd add in here is these interviewers have seen thousands of applications, so they can often tell, even I can tell at this point, a well-crafted story apart from someone who's genuinely thought through their business, right? Because people who've crafted their stories really well start to sort of get a little uncomfortable when you go off the edges, and at that point you can really tell that this thing is not super real. So all things considered, I'd say mistake number one, don't overthink your application itself. Build a good business. Learn to express different aspects of that business quite clearly. And then you will eventually get there with your application, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to prove to them that you have an interesting business and an interesting brain on yourself to be able to build out that business. I think mistake number two is being too strategic. I feel like enough founders, especially the ones that I've encountered, have done a lot of top-down analysis, a lot of high-level market measurement, have read VC blog posts, consultant blog posts, have tried to analyze almost like a public market investor, flaws in Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and so on and so forth. And in the process, they miss the tactical aspect of what is that specific product you're going to put in a specific person's hands and ask them to give you their money in exchange for this, right? And that actual tactical process is what folks are looking for, because the goal with early stage startups is anyway to make a small group of people really, really happy. So the top-down analysis is almost an afterthought. If you've thought through the tactical specifics, you are able to answer 90% of the questions and are able to have a more interesting conversation. I think the specific story of how you're going to sell a product is a more powerful story than any genius strategy you may have about how your business is going to be really great in the long run, because all the macro factors and all the competitive environment is going to align to making you successful. I think mistake number three is almost like an extension of the previous question here, is answering the how much money can you make question with a top-down analysis. Let me give you an example. In our previous podcast, we talked about CareStack and looked at the dental services market and said, the dental services market is worth $140 billion. 10% of that could be worth $10 billion. There's a different way to approaching that problem, which is we could have answered the question as that at 10,000 dental practices that make $1 million a year, we will charge these customers $650 a month, and here's the amount of money that we could make. The reason why I think the top-down is not as interesting as the bottom-up is that the top-down proves that you've read an interesting report or you've done a good job Googling it, and of late, you probably run the right query on Perplexity. The bottom-up analysis forces you to think through the mechanics of your business, right? Helps you think through helps in a quantifiable fashion, express your pricing strategy, your customer definition, your actual go-to-market strategy, because now you've talked about who the specific customer is and how you may actually go ahead and reach them. So I think not doing a good bottom-up analysis is a flaw, especially because having read YC applications, which alums used to do in the past, I used to find the walls of text overwhelming, right? People have these huge stories on what they're going to build and who they are and all the great things they've done. My eyes would typically get drawn to the few numbers in the sheet, right? And those numbers, if they are also a story as opposed to reality, then I would get quite put off. So that's the other reason why I personally think not doing a good bottom-up analysis can be a mistake. Though, of course, this is generic. It doesn't apply to all businesses because different businesses have different approaches. But I take this as a general rule of thumb. I think the last mistake is not doing enough to show tangible results. There's one easy way to double, triple your chances of getting into YC even. Pick a metric that defines your business. This could be revenue. This could be the number of users. This could be any quantifiable measure of what you choose to have as, of how you choose to judge the progress of your business. And then increase it. If you have no customers, find a customer. If you have no revenue, make that first dollar. The reason this is important is that most applicants you're up against are pre-product, are pre-revenue, right? And a lot of those folks get in. Now, compared to them, if you made even $1 of revenue, you're already a class apart. And think of it from an interviewer's perspective, right? I may see a lot of applications that look very similar. Would I pick if all else being equal, would I pick the person who has no revenue, or would I pick the person who's actually gone through the process of selling something? And when they've done that, I have a few data points. Number one, I know this person can sell. Number two, I know that the customer is real. Number three, I have an anchor point in the story against which I can go ahead and ask questions to actually find out whether you made someone happy. So this goes back to my first mistake, which is if you're spending all this time prepping a YC application, maybe do a little less of that and do a little bit more of actually growing your business. And then those metrics might actually improve your chances of getting into YC, even if your questions aren't perfectly formulated and there are grammatical mistakes and your answers are a bit too long and so on and so forth. And this might be my bias, but I think if you have a Google Doc or a Notion doc with hundreds of comments flying around and you've spent weeks and weeks on that, you've already spent a little too much time. Focus instead on getting real with your business. In fact, I'd suggest go and read some of these Paul Graham articles, go and watch some of these podcasts, because the information that you get through this program is kind of on the web already. Listen to that, be real with yourself. Try and execute that specifically in some ways, and then you'll have more interesting stories to tell, and you already know the mindset of the person who's interviewing you. So that's almost like a better way to prep for the application, in my opinion. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. To watch the full episode of my experience at Y Combinator, click on the video here.